aadl.org. AADL is honored to be hosting tonight's presentation in honor of the newly published book, Poems from the Gulag by Mykola Horbal, and that has been translated by Myrosia Stefaniuk, who is the author of Details of an Hourglass. Tonight's program will include a narration by Myrosia Stefaniuk about Horbal's life and creative process, intertwined with some readings of his poems and also a performance of several of his songs from Imprisonment by the guest bandurist Mykola Deychakiwsky. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any names. Also, make sure you pick up some information in the back table that is about the instrument that is going to be played tonight, the bandura. Now, I will turn the stage over to Irina Bondarenko, who is the president of the Ann Arbor Ukrainian National Women's League of America, Chapter 50, for a further introduction for tonight's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for beating the traffic and being here with us today. I want to start from thanking the Ann Arbor Public Library. I want to thank them for hosting this event and other events focusing on Ukraine. I just got an email today that the library accepted donation of children books in Ukrainian. So now we have Abaga Galamaga books on the shelf. So please share this news with families with small children that may be interested. And let's give them an applause. I want to thank our presenters, Mykola and Myrosia, for sharing Mykola Horbal's poetry with us today. But before we start, I would like to say a few words about Asia Humetsky, for whom we dedicate this program. Asia loved Ukrainian poetry and songs, and I think she would be thrilled about this event. Asia was a scholar of Ukrainian language, a writer and translator. It's not possible to talk about Asia and not talk about Ukrainian language. The word for language in Ukrainian is mova. It's a feminine word, like in many languages, in German, French, Italian, and it has nurturing power. It has very strong power. Language can influence, can injure, it can heal. Mykola Horbal's book and today's event celebrates the power of the language, the power of the written world, the power of the world that can set one free even in Gulag, even in imprisonment. Because of that power, for centuries, Ukrainian language was suppressed, forbidden, and ridiculed. The Ukrainian language, it's like a fish bone in the throat of Russian colonial powers. It's not at random that on May 23rd of this year, the major Ukrainian printing house became a target for Russian missiles. It's not random at all. If we go back another 60 years, on the May of 24th of 1946, it was an arson in the National Library of Science in Ukraine. One floor was burned out, only one floor. It was a floor with Ukrainian old books, with manuscripts, archives. Surprisingly, the water was blocked on that day in this area in Kiev, and they couldn't extinguish the fire. Another 30 years ago, in the late 20s and the early 30s, it was a generation of Ukrainian language writers that was put in prison and executed. We call them executed Renaissance. I can go with this list for quite a long time, back for a few centuries. But I will stop and just say that despite all these efforts, Ukrainian language is alive and kicking. It's alive thanks to poets like Mykola Horbal, translators like Myrosia Stefaniuk, bandurists like Mykola Deychakiwsky, and teachers like Asia Humetsky. Asia was born in Kharkiv, Ukraine, She was born in a family of Ukrainian poets. She called him always Baikar. He was one of these executed Renaissance. He was killed when Ася, without any trial. He was killed when she was a young child. And only because of the wisdom and incredible powers of her mother, Tatiana Kardinalovska, they escaped. They were kicked out of apartment, left with no means, but they survived. And then the war came, and Ася and her sister were taken to Germany to forced labor camps. Then they fled Soviets in Europe. They fled first to France, then to Italy, then to UK. And then they made it to the United States as displaced person, DPs. But Ася was incredibly talented and hardworking. In a few years, I think in 6 or 7 years, right? She graduated from Harvard with PhD. And she came here in Ann Arbor to teach Russian language because Ukrainian wasn't the language that she could do. There was no Ukrainian studies. She started Ukrainian studies program here in Michigan. And besides her work at the university, she was very active. She was with Scientific Shevchenko Society. She was founding member of the Ukrainian National Women's Chapter here in Ann Arbor. And she had a spark. Oh my God, she had a spark. It was so contagious and so alive. She just brightened the room when she was there. I will stop and invite to the stage Roman Humetsky, her son, to share some memories of Ася. Thank you.
Dobry wieczór. So Irina gave a very nice biography of Ася, my mother, which is, she was very active here once she came to Ann Arbor as well. There was a core group of Ukrainian families, I want to say within the Ann Arbor area, like 6 or 7 families that bonded together, and they decided that they wanted to institute a program to teach their kids about Ukraine. So the group started Szkoła Ukrainoznawstwa in Ann Arbor. So we met on Saturdays from 9 to 12. So in the 60s and 70s, so we missed all the cartoons that were on at that time. So, but we did learn about geography, history, all the culture and stuff. So she made an extra effort for the local Ukrainian, first-generation Ukrainian kids to learn about Ukraine, which I carry with me to this day. She loved to sing. She loved to cook. She was a terrible cook. So, but we ate her food anyways. So, and she helped, you know, she spoke Russian as a course of, a lot of Ukrainians knew Russian at the time. It's the only way you could teach, it was with that language. So it's time to start a Ukrainian program at the University of Michigan. So she advocated for it, and it started, and Svetlana over here is continuing that work. And yeah, she was very active in our community and passionate about Ukrainian culture. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
She's a teaching professor at the University of Michigan Slavic Department, to say a few words about department and about Ася.
Добрий вечір і слава Україні. I'm very honored actually to speak about Ася because just a few years ago we had very intimate, literally evening with Ася. I will never forget her sitting in front of the audience, in front of our students and faculty, and reading her poems at the Rackham Auditorium. It was just amazing, and I'm very happy that we have this wonderful evening in her memory today as well. I was asked to say a few words about Asa's work at the University of Michigan. As Irina said, and Roman, Asa was my mentor since day one. I joined the Department of Slavic Languages and Literature from 1995. But Asa joined the department in 1953. And by 1969, as we have heard, her focus expanded to Ukrainian studies, playing a really very important role in establishing and shaping the Ukrainian studies program at our university. And this program definitely since then grown into one of the foremost centers for Ukrainian scholarship in the United States. I can say that was honor actually, because we never stopped offering at least one course in Ukrainian language at the University of Michigan since 1969. Asa's contributions extended beyond her teaching. Her widely used textbook, as many of you know, maybe many of you even used it in your Ukrainian studies, Modern Ukrainian, was published in 1980, and it provided essential resources for students and scholars, fostering deeper understanding of the Ukrainian language. She also authored her selected works або вибрані філологічні праці in 2017, which compiled her numerous influential articles on Ukrainian literature. Her research on the executive Renaissance, the Ukrainian literary revival of the 1920s and early 1930s, brought critical attention to the suppressed voices of this vibrant period and definitely highlighted its enduring influence on Ukrainian literature. As we already heard, her leadership in Ukrainian academic and cultural organizations further solidified her impact. And as founding member of the Ann Arbor chapter of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America, she actually she championed the promotion of Ukrainian cultural scholarship in Ann Arbor. Her active involvement with the Shevchenko Society, Ukrainian Academy of Arts and Sciences in the United States, where she served as vice president, was instrumental in advancing Ukrainian studies and fostering a greater appreciation for Ukrainian heritage across academic communities. So Asa's research on Ukrainian dissident poets, including Василь Стус, Любомир Дмитрук, and Mykola Horbal, for instance, illuminated their resilience and resistance against Soviet repression. Her analysis of Vasil Stus' poetry, noting that, quote, Stus's verses stand as commitment to Stus's verses stand as a defiant testament to the resilience of the Ukrainian spirit. And this particular quote underscores Asa's commitment to preserving and promoting the literary and cultural contributions of these poets to Ukrainian literature. So today's event, The Naked Word of Mykola Horbal, Poems from Gulag, reflects the spirits of Asa's work. Mykola Horbal, like Vasil Stus, faced severe repression for his dissident writings, spending 16 years, in Gulag. His poetry, as presented by Myrosia today, will be presented by Myrosia, exemplifies their fortitude and creativity that Asa Khumetsky championed through her research. So Asa Khumetsky legacy continues to illuminate the struggles and triumphs of Ukrainian writers and ensures that their voices and stories remain vital through scholarly work and public events like this one.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. And we will turn to our main program, but I just want to say I have hopes that this event will integrate a serious literary event in memory of Asa Khumetsky. I don't know how we will get there, but that's the hope. So I would like to invite to the stage our presenters, Myrosia Stefaniuk and Mykola Deychakiwsky. Myrosia Stefaniuk is an educator, writer, and translator. Her published translations include complete collection of Mykola Horbal, Vasyl Horopchenko, and Mikhailo Vorobyov, plus Ukrainian poetry in prose and numerous anthologies and literary journals. Former faculty of Wayne State University and freelance writer for the Ukrainian Weekly. She is an author of The Ukrainians of Detroit and Dibrova Diary. and has written extensively about Ukrainian immigration, arts, and culture. So Mykola Deychakiwsky is musician, activist, and wonderful, wonderful bandurist. And he began bandura studies in '72 with Grigory Kitasi in Cleveland, Ohio. He played with Taras Shevchenko Ukrainian bandurist chorus between 1974 and 1999, and again since 2017. During 70s and 80s, Mykola frequently taught individuals and directed bandura camps and ensembles. In 2012, he renewed his activities at the Bobrivka and Kabzarska, right? I'm sorry if I mispronounce the name. The summer bandura camps and at the Detroit School of Bandura. He has written numerous arrangements and composition for bandura ensembles. He holds the position of Senior Program Officer, Civil Society, and the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. Thank you. I invite you to start our program.
Dobry wieczór, good evening. I would just like to add before we begin that I truly am honored to be a part of this event for Asia Humecka. I have known Asia for many, many years. We traveled to Ukrainian studies conferences. We sang together. She had a beautiful voice, and she knew songs, and she knew verses and verses and verses of them. We even searched for mushrooms together in the woods. And we collaborated on translations, primarily of her sister Mirtala's poetry and her mother, and the memoir that she wrote about her parents. So we worked together on a lot of things, and it's truly an honor to be here. Thank you.
Is that your phone?
Okay. No. Irina, thank you for your introduction. It's a wonderful lead-in to what we are going to do here today. Most of you know that for centuries, Russia has not only strived to dominate the Ukrainian nation, but actually to annihilate it completely. First by the Tsars, then by the Soviets, and now by Putin and his armies. The entire world now sees the horrors and the barbarous atrocities committed over the last few years, months, weeks, days. This evening, I will take you back to the 60s and the 70s and to the waves of massive arrests and repressions when the Soviet government cracked down on the Ukrainian liberation movement that was then spearheaded, again, by writers, artists, musicians, prominent intellectuals known as the Shistysatniki, the 60s dissidents. Thousands who spoke out against the systemic Soviet destruction of the Ukrainian national consciousness, culture, language, were convicted in closed trials and sentenced to imprisonment in Soviet penal institutions, slave labor camps, and exile in extremely harsh conditions. Such was the fate of poet-musician Mykola Horbal. Charged with anti-Soviet agitation and propaganda, which was what everyone was charged with then, for his poetry, songs, activism, and defense of human rights, Horbal was arrested, sentenced, and rearrested 3 times for a total of 16 years imprisonment in the Siberian Gulag. The final prison term was in the so-called death zone, the notorious Perm prison camps 35 and 36 in Siberia, where he remained until 1988 and was released during Perestroika. Details of an Hourglass, which is his book, was written during those 16 years in the Soviet camps. There are his poetic reflections about the brutal reality of that world. For him, the word became a powerful weapon for breaking through prison walls. The program today will be in English, but in the program books, we have included several poems, both in Ukrainian and English, so you can see and hear the language as well. And so we bring you the naked word of Mykola Horbal. In the bleak Siberian landscape, where beyond barbed wire, there is no visible demarcation between horizon and sky, night and day, reality and nightmare, for Mykola Horbal, there was only the word, naked, completely naked.
When there was no day and there was no night, because nothing existed yet, no one cursed another and no one prayed to anyone because nothing had been born yet. There was only the word, naked, completely naked.
The word, bared to its essence, exposes the inner man. It is Horbal's key to the meaning of existence, his proclamation of truth, beauty, and faith. Ultimately, it is his redemption from isolation, alienation, darkness, and despair. Amidst the barren prison surroundings, devoid of warmth, light, human touch, a desolate world of blue sadness where sorrows clang frightfully inside the head, Horbal searches for a spark, an image, a memory that will illuminate the moment, but does not find them in this external world.
Сутужно. Молив хоч іскру ласки. Вимолив, втішився, роздмухав, заходивсь і грівся коло багаття розпаленою фантазією. Не набагато вистачило. Вдавання не дозволило любості підкинути в пригаслу ватру хоч пару тихих, теплих слів. Oppressed, I implored at least a spark of mercy. Granted, I rejoiced, stoked it, hustled about and warmed myself around the fire inflamed by fantasy. It did not last for long. Pretense did not allow delight to feed the dying embers with a few quiet, warming words.
The poet yearns for these warming words with a firm belief in their existence. One needs only to find the key.
It seems it wouldn't be so sad if one could only reach the hiding place of those wise words that provide balance.
But the joys are few, and peace is distributed only in tiny, skimpy doses.
She flew in for a moment, leaving a rush of wings, an imprint of freedom. She awakened a quivering desire to live, but not for long. After a lightning flash, the night is darker. Here, they do not await summer. Here, they do not await spring. Here, they do not await winter. Here, they do not await autumn. Here, they await the end.
Although common themes in Horbal's poems are loneliness, sadness, and helplessness in the midst of evil, his internal battle is not permeated by anger or aggression. Instead, it is a quiet but stubborn rebellion and a search for beauty in small saving graces within his harsh surroundings. Even amidst the darkness, there are heartwarming, tender moments with delightful images and even a touch of humor.
When? When? And how should I know when? Just yesterday, I distributed colors to flowers, and there were so many tears. Violets took theirs, violet. And the asters, such greed, would have taken all if they could. The peony paled, insisted on pink. And what should I give the roses? Blue or what? What is there to say? You can't please everyone.
While nature, memories of home, summer, youth, and the life that once was are a saving grace, inevitably such moments are short-lived and bittersweet, with a tone of sadness and loss.
Glass slivers of shattered illusions in the kaleidoscope of time formed capricious patterns. Poetry. Perhaps this toy must be smashed as well.
Horbal's poems are short, many only a few lines in length, and yet each is dense, layered with metaphor and meaning, rich in harmony and overtones. Sometimes parallel images are placed side by side, memories with happiness, music with peace, death with sadness. At other times, they are in direct opposition. Days and nights, suffering and hope, deceit and truth, reality and fantasy. Most startling and arresting are incongruous images juxtaposed, the lyrical with raw pain, the tender with the frightening, and the innocent with the brutal.
Unshaved heads' hair no longer rises from fear. The bloodied sun struggled uphill toward dawn. Amber thickens with time after drowning the ant. A butterfly lands on the white carcass of a dead calf. They took turns carrying him the way they carry little boys on their backs. Only this one was over 50 and had both legs missing.
Ironically, Horbal insists that he is not a poet. The KGB made me a poet, he says. He refers to his work as poetic reflections written to chronicle the horrors of the Soviet totalitarian regime. They were scratched on tiny bits of cigarette paper and smuggled out of prison into the free world, where they were published, here first in the United States when he was still imprisoned, and later in 2008 in Kyiv. His words are dedicated to the thousands that risked their freedom and lives to break the Iron Curtain. These miniature reflections succinctly express both the raging battle within and the healing beauty and peace of nature, even when it is melancholy. In his song, Nad Potokom, by the brook, the poet sees a solitary kalina, a gelder rose shrub in bloom, but he notes sadly that the bluebird did not return this year from the other side. He beckons springtime to let his sorrow flow downstream. The little brook sings to him, "Look at the beauty and at the crystal waters. Grief has no place here." But the poet replies, "Don't try to console me. Only the bluebird can bring joy." Nad Potokom by the brook, arranged for bandura by Mykola Deychakiwsky and performed by him.
Над глиб, над потоком неглибоким розквітає кущ калини одинокий. Цього року до потоку не вернулась синя пташка з того боку. Тільки мої сни весни принесли тихий, тихий жаль. Весно, візьми сумний мій сон, пусти за водою дарену печаль. А струмочок, як дзвіночок, до калини подає свій голосочок. Глянь на вроду, в чисту воду, квітуванню не пасує туга зроду. Ой, не тіш, не радь, годі умовлять, не розрадиш ти, ой, ні. Не знати втіх мені, їх лиш люба пташка зможе принести.
Sound and song are blatantly absent in Horbal's solitary surroundings.
In the zone of flowers and birds, the bluebird doesn't speak to the flowers. Here it is offensive to talk of beauty. Here in the zone of immense silence.
In this immense silence, the word is pointed inward, and the poet slips into infinite space and the vastness of the universe, where eternities twirl their simmering dance of infinity.
Час занурився в пітьму, лиш чути, як космос скрипить трибами галактик, мов старезний млин. Та вузлик нервів з острахом дивиться на вкриту космічним порохом павутинку ілюзій. Урветься? Time burrowed itself in darkness. Only the cosmos was heard creaking galactic cogwheels like an ancient mill. A bundle of nerves fearfully gazes at a web of illusions covered with cosmic dust. Will it rip?
While in the cosmos there is greatness and power in eternal motion, in the prison cell there is only the painful reality of his own precarious state. The question continually arises: what next? How to survive? How to traverse the road between despair and hope? And how to transform raw pain and anguish into refinement of one's soul when surrounded by lies, doubt, injustice, and emptiness.
The dream thickens in dense darkness. Paralysis constricts movement. Only on knees and elbows among the graves. Where is God's sepulcher? Every night among the graves seized by graveyard terror, let me have peace, beloved, with your absence in dreams. Every night through the abyss, the precipices fill with vipers, faceless, miserable nights without flowers, without you, without day.
The vastness of the universe pitted against the crushing walls of prison is a recurring theme in Horbal's confinement. He resists falling into depression, but the dark shadow of melancholy is always present.
The cell is narrow. Arms outspread, I lean against the walls and convince myself that I don't need a bigger one. I don't plan to dance here. I try to convince myself. Then why do I feel the walls are closing in, squeezing together like skis?
At night, when the exhausted watchman of consciousness lets down its guard and the barriers between the real and the imagined are removed, dreams become nightmares of terror and fear with no option to escape.
Cold sweat splattered on a pile of hot clay because this is your body. I screamed at the edge of dream and reality and ran along the ledge of love and hate, insanity and insight, falling and flying, life and death. Along margins as thin as blades, I ran from myself.
The other fundamental element in Horbal's work is time. He chose the book's title, Details of an Hourglass, because that is what you do in prison. You observe time. Every day in the cell is identical. Gray like those sand grains, no visual or audio stimulation from the outside, just the same thing day after day, one grain after another.
Sand and sand, no end, no boundary. But all you need is 2 handfuls for an hourglass, because time is the best judge. Now this desert will trickle in a fine stream through my carotid artery. And when the last sand grain falls, they will invert the desert again.
Fate dealt Horbal a bitter blow. He is first and foremost a musician. Although separated from his beloved profession, even within the prison walls, he continues to write songs and dedicate them to his family and friends far away. The Autumn Song was written in 1973 in the Perm prison camp. It was inspired by a letter from a friend who described the strained atmosphere in Lviv, a city spiritually devastated by the arrests of dissidents in 1972. It is a nostalgic song, filled with longing, images of migrating geese, fall flowers, falling leaves, and memories of freedom. The singer plays a Jew's harp and repeats the refrain, it is so quiet, so lonely, without words. Osinna Pisnya, the Autumn Song.
Над містом гуси проспівали тугу, а вітрові регоче з голих днів. Лиш спомин волі десь на дримбі грає, і тихо так, спокійно так, без слів. І тихо так, спокійно так, без слів. І я би цілий день на дримбі грала мелодії із вересневих снів. Осінні квіти ждуть своє незнане, спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів. Спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів. І ще бим цілий день на дримбі грала ті думи, що підслухала в гаї. Прощальний танець кружить жовте листя, спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів. Спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів.
The composer mourns the absence of music in his barren surroundings, but he does so without bitterness.
I whittled bits of music out of a willow twig, axed out 2 poems with a topirets. They wither and dry. Let them. I'll warm my feet in the ashes.
It is no surprise that tone, timbre, dynamics, rhythm, and tempo are ever-present elements in which Mykola's naked word is clothed until sound and senses are organically fused. Even silence is never empty. In a poem about death, where without a word, without a sound, they left us forever, everything that is left behind sings the funeral dirge.
Так беззвучно відійшов день від нас назавжди. Скінчився. Тополя свічкою у небо сахала тіні з'явиська, блукало ланом чиєсь голосіння. Під цвинтарем осиротілий ранок хникав. Час змістився, а навколо нікого. Під цвинтарем осиротілий ранок хникав. Час змістився, а навколо нікого. Лиш мокра ворона натріснутим голосом нарекла долю, та ще хтось досвідком заганяє цвях у дошку. Without a sound, day left us forever. Finished. A poplar taper cast shadow apparitions in the sky. Someone's lament meandered through the field. An orphaned mourning whimpered near the cemetery. Time shifted, but no one was around. Only a wet crow's crackly voice begrudged fate, and before dawn, someone pounded a nail into a wooden board.
Ultimately, each individual must undergo his own journey. And whether the road is, in Horbal's word, a path of thorns, embroidered with feathers, or blades of grass, or crosses of barbed wire, one must strive not to fall into nothingness, but to maintain one's dignity even in the most difficult conditions.
In the corner behind the bathhouse, when you find a moment of solitude, you can hear how, accompanied by metal wires and fences, the forest sings, Hail Mary.
For Horbal, the theme of the invincibility of spirit is crystallized into pure form saturated with spirituality. In horrific circumstances, he yearns for something higher, something more noble, and never loses dignity or faith. He survived the hell of Soviet prisons and concentration camps and was not broken. Only my body was imprisoned, not my spirit, he affirms. He describes his harsh reality as a freeing spiritual journey.
I am grateful to fate that led me to Mordovia, the Urals, and Siberia, where I met the finest Ukrainians. It was there that I was rid of that most miserable of emotions, fear. I feel that it was there that I became truly human. Why should I be afraid? The evil empire will collapse. It will fall apart like all others before it, because such is the law of eternity. Thank you, God, for this law. So why should I be afraid?
A humble man possessing great courage, dignity, and faith in others and in God, Horbal appears unaware of his own gift, that ability to capture in a few sparse lines the essence of man's existence. Compressed without superfluous dressing, Mykola's poetry is illuminated from within. It radiates spirituality and strength, a keen awareness of truth and beauty, and his stalwart faith in the goodness of man and the grace of God.
Such an immense amount of warmth only you can bestow, Almighty, because your bounty has no end. I raise my face to you and fold my palms, humbled by the radiance of your countenance. Help me release the burden of doubts so that joyfully I could come to you.
Leonid Plusht, another outstanding Ukrainian dissident, stated that the characteristics of a truly great poet is that his works contain a condensed history of his nation, both its past and its future. In that context, Horbal's miniatures capsulize the history of Ukraine in centuries past and the moral indignation of its contemporary status. The Soviet Union has collapsed, but Russia's savage military aggression and genocide in Ukraine continue. As Ukraine defends its independence and sovereignty, Horbal's words are as poignant today as they were decades ago. Truly, they are an undisputable testament that you can imprison the body, but not the spirit. The final song, A Pole Czarne, The Field is Black, was written in the Ural concentration camp, but it could have been written yesterday. It is voiced by a young daughter who awaits her father to return from the field. She has decked the house with flowers, cooked a wonderful meal, and waits for him for a long, long time. Then she carries the meal for him into the field. But the field is black, sown with sorrow and the screech of blackbirds. A pole te czarne, the field is black.
Хатку замітала, квітям прикрашала, з поля прийде татко, доня татка ждала. А поле те чорне, засіяне жалем, на тім чорнім полі вороння кричало, на тім полі чорнім вороння кричало. В рушник зав'язала полудень для тата, треба йти у поле, доки можна ждати. А поле те чорне, засіяне жалем, на тім чорнім полі вороння кричало, на тім полі чорнім вороння кричало. Зняла рученята, чорних птахів гонить, десь не видно тата. Обід захолоне. А поле те чорне, засіяне жалем, на тім чорнім полі вороння кричало, на тім чорнім полі вороння кричало.
In essence, Horbal's poetry is a poetry of silence, but it carries a powerful message that resounds and calls each of us to action. We will close with a poem from the section entitled Podorожna Kaplichka, Roadside Chapel, dedicated to the memory of Mykola Horbal's fellow brothers who died in imprisonment.
Коли зберем плачі усі, всі голосіння твої, Україно, твій стогін і розпач твій, твої молитви за всіх часів твоєї страсної дороги по всій землі. І як не розірветься серце від тягаря цього, повернемось. When we gather all the tears, all your laments, O Ukraine, your wailing and your despair, your prayers from all the times of your way of the cross throughout the land, and if the heart does not break from the weight of the burden, we will return.
Дякуємо. Дуже дякуємо. І дякуємо Миколі одному і другому за ті слова і за пісні. Before we go on to questions, then there may be some in the audience, there are a few things that I would talk about. First of all, I would like to pay tribute to a man who was a true friend of Ukraine, Ukrainian poets and translators. Most of you may not have heard of him. His name was Kirk Lawrence Howard. He was an American actor who performed on Broadway and many theaters on the East Coast. And after he retired from acting, he established a voiceover program on the internet known as Bespoke Vocals, on which he gave exquisite readings of poetry. I don't know who introduced him to Ukrainian poets and poetry, but he did many, many incredible readings of Ukrainian poems in translation, and they were always expressed with a really deep understanding and compassion. I counted in the last year something like 35 Ukrainian poets and poems that he actually read. When he stumbled upon Mykola Horbal's works, I think it was on Facebook, he contacted me and asked me to send him some of his poems, and when the book came out, he asked me to send him a copy of the details of the Hourglass, and I was honored by his many, many readings of Horbal's poems. Kirk passed away a few days ago on September 3rd, just this week. He introduced his last reading from the details of Horbal's book with these words. I was always awed by Mykola Horbal's ability to capture such pain, defiance, and yes, beauty while imprisoned in the brutal Soviet Gulag. His poems never failed to break my heart or to uplift my soul. Thank you, dear friend Kirk, and Vichna Pamyat, eternal memory. Your gentle voice and love of poetry will always live in our hearts. One more note, if you have a chance, there are books there, both by Asa and other books that Mykola Horbal has written since his release. In his book, The Details of an Hourglass, there are drawings with a very interesting history. The drawings were done by his older brother, Bohdan. Bohdan was born with Down syndrome. He lived in the village with his mother. He could not read or write. All he did all day long was draw pictures. And his mother warmed the stove and burned them in the stove to keep the fire going. Many years later, when Mykola was brought to the prison camp in Mordovia, he was astounded to see that the images his brother had drawn, he was now seeing with his own eyes. Hordes of prisoners, helmets, machine guns, dogs, prison walls and fences, they had all been depicted in Bohdan's art. Knowing that Bohdan could never himself have seen any of these images, he began to collect all of these drawings and ultimately established a museum in the village, Lychacha, where the drawings are displayed, and he also put together and established Bohdan's Gallery, a charitable foundation for to support non-traditional art and non-professional artists, especially those with handicaps. And finally, I would like Mykola to say a few words about the place we've been talking about, the Perm camps of Siberia. Mykola had the good fortune, bad fortune, of going and seeing these camps after they were made into a museum. The Soviet Union had closed all of the camps originally and then established this one as a museum. And Mykola had the opportunity to see it, where thousands of Ukrainian dissidents and human rights activists had been imprisoned for anti-Soviet agitation. Many of them never came out alive, and among them, Vasil Stus, Valery Marchenko, and Aleksa Tekhi, who perished there. Mykola?
It was in the early 2000s when the time seemed that things would be different than they are, and there were activists who wanted and got the Perm 36 Museum, which was the last gulag where political prisoners were held in the former Soviet Union, to create a museum along the lines of other places like Robben Island or Auschwitz, places where things happened in history that we all hope and continue to hope will never and should ever be repeated again. It's about a 4-hour drive from Perm in the Urals, and two words that I could describe for it are remote and bleak. And really, a sense of in the middle and over, you had prisoners, concrete, metal, especially when they were put into isolated cells, solitary confinement, where for an hour a day, they would be allowed to go outside of a building into like a 6 foot by 6 foot little courtyard, which had grates, metal grates over the top, so they might be able to see some sun. Sometimes from the windows they could see a little bit of greenery, but it was a very oppressive situation. At the time, there were people who pointed out, I saw placards of so many honoring Ukrainian dissidents as well as others from other nations of the Soviet Union, seeing the places where prisoners had been buried in unnamed cemeteries. And it, sadly, of course, now the museum does not exist anymore except virtually, but in reality, the Putin regime shut that down. But it was very moving to be able to be there where Mykola Horbal was imprisoned for so many years.
I did put together a folder of photographs of what the prison looks like. If you go over to the table, there's a folder there with photographs of the Perm Camp 36. There's also a folder there of Mykola Horbal's brothers' drawings there, as well as other information. So do stop by there and take a look at some of these. And we will be happy to take questions, comments, please. We have a traveling microphone if anybody wants to ask anything or say anything.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just repeat your question in the microphone so the live stream can pick it up.
You know, as we're hearing more about Ukrainian culture, or at least myself learning more and more, one of the things that we've heard as an observation is that the Soviet Union brought a lot of cultures together and dispersed people across the entire lands. I'm curious, did Horbal have any influence of other cultures while he was in the prisons, or were the gulags exclusively limited to Ukrainians in his one collective?
He did, because he was sent to several prisons from place to place, and he did come across others constantly. He talks about them. He wrote 6 books after he came out of prison, and 2 of them are memoirs, and he talks about a lot of the people there in those memoirs. So definitely. The other books that he wrote are kind of autobiographical novels, again, where he speaks about a lot of these things. Yes, he definitely there. Definitely. I saw other prisoners. He names all the different countries and all the different people. And as Mykola was reading in one of the poems, he said, it was an honor to be there. I met some of the finest people there in those prisons. And he wasn't just talking about the Ukrainians, but all the other political prisoners, because that was the prison for political prisoners, who were considered the greatest enemy of the people. Yeah.
Myrosia, can you please tell us how did you find out about Mykola Horbal and his poetry?
It was a long time ago. It was in the 60s and 70s when there were all of these prisoners that were, dissidents that were being imprisoned, and we had formed committees here in the United States called Committees in Defense of Ukrainian Prisoners, political prisoners. We wrote letters to Congress, we wrote letters to Washington, the usual. I had the fortune to become acquainted with Nadia Svitlechna, who was one of the prisoners that was released and came to the United States. She lived in New York, and I had the fortune to meet her, and she was the godmother of one of Mykola's son, and friends of Stus and all the other dissidents very well. And she was the one that introduced me to his poems. She gave me a few of his poems, handwritten and written on one of those old typewriters with one hand, with one finger that we used to type in Ukrainian on. And I fell in love with his work, and I said, this has to go out into the world. And so I started to play with the translations then, but they were very difficult to do. I mean, they're tiny, 2-3 lines, but so packed with levels that it was very difficult to do. When Mykola was released in 1988, he was invited to come to the United States. And I had the good fortune of meeting him. In fact, we invited him to come to Detroit. He stayed at our house, and he came to University of Michigan and gave a lecture here, in fact. And that's when I promised him. We sang a lot of Lemko songs with him, too. You asked about Lemko songs. I promised him I would translate the poems. And I went back to them over and over again, and it was just very difficult to do. I'd put them away, I'd come back to them, I'd put them away, I'd come back to them. And finally I decided, well, he is still alive. He is now 83, living in Ukraine. And during everything that has been happening during COVID, I decided I'm going to complete this. And I sat down and worked day and night until I finished it. I thought I would have to call him to ask what some of the words mean, but I decided that I had to live for a while to really understand and to be able to get into that poetry. And that's why I wasn't able to do it when I was young, and children and life and everything else. The mentality of the prison, you have to enter it and you have to sit there. And that's when I started researching the Gulag and looking at those photographs and understand what these people went through and survived. I remember listening to the interview with Karamazov when he was just released during the prisoner exchange, and he was in solitary for about a year. These people, 16 years, not always in solitary, but many of them were. Stus, I mean, that killed him ultimately. He couldn't survive it. So that's how it started. So it's hard to tell. Someone asks me, how long did it take you to do? And I keep saying a lifetime, because it took a lifetime to understand that.
If you'll allow me to make a comment, because I do know Ukrainian quite well, and born in the U.S., I do know English quite well too. I am amazed at the depth and artistry of how well these poems read and how well they're done in English. So my congratulations to you for that.
Thank you. And I, of course, am amazed of how beautifully he was able to render them in English and Ukrainian, as well as the song. Thank you for being you. I think there's another question there. Okay.
I have a question to Mykola about the songs, right? You put the music to the couple of Horbal's poems.
Not quite, because they are his melodies.
His melodies?
Yeah, the melodies were given. So it was just a matter of trying to work an accompaniment that reflected the mood, the spirit, the intent of the songs.
He makes it sound so easy.
Yeah,
It was
but-
just a matter of putting it into an arrangement for Bandura.
But it's still, to me, it's still collaboration. Can you tell us, please, how did it feel to you? How do you work through this?
Everything starts with the word, perhaps as we started today, the naked word. And so in a way, it was also made easier for me because there was a melody line. So the melody implies certain harmonies, but the word implies the meaning and what the intent is, and then that also gives hints on some of what the mood might be. My personal inclination is to try to keep it as simple as possible. Maybe that's due to my limited technique. But no, really, all jokes aside, I think that can help keep in mind what is main here, what is the most important thing here, is that is to convey the meaning of the word. And the music is subservient to that. So that's kind of my approach, and I hope it worked.
I should add to that I had opportunity on many occasions to talk to Mykola Horbal, and when we did the original presentation, when he sang the songs, I did send him a copy of that, and he was very, very moved. This past summer at the Kobzar Tabir, there was one song that we didn't do here because it's a Christmas song, and we thought, in September maybe it's not appropriate. But it was a delightful song. It's a children's fantasy song where it's Christmas Eve, and all the animals come to the forest, and they bring gifts. The squirrels bring nuts. The cat comes in his best boots, of course, and the bear comes, and so on. And Mykola took that song, he played it at the presentation, and he taught it to the students at this Kobzar Tabir. and they sang it and played it, and in fact, they acted it out. So, and again, I sent that to Mykola Horbal, and he just went through an automobile accident, has a broken hand. He was so depressed. I played the song to him, and it was on, I could see his face, and he was just grinning from ear to ear, delighted that this was going out into the world. And this is really what this is all about. That's what translation is about, to send it into the world, so beyond Ukraine, so other people can understand and see the beauty of our language and the anguish that our nation is going through now. There was a question back there, I think. Yeah. Could you into the microphone?
Knowing that you're a writer and a poet yourself, how did working on this translation affect your work?
That's a tough one.
I'm sorry.
Well, you know, because it goes right into the heart and soul, yes. So you're not even aware of what it does to you, okay? For me, one of the most important things that I learned from it is that the honing down into the naked word, you know, to take out all the superfluous stuff out, to just keep honing and honing. And that's why it took so long to do this. I can't tell you how many volumes of versions of these poems I have. And that's taught me a lot about poetry, and it taught me a lot about life.
Well, bravo, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like that's it. Please come see the books, hang around, talk, come and talk to us. And thank you again, the library, Irina, the Ukrainian Women's chapter of Ann Arbor, the Slavic Ukrainian Studies program, Mykola, and everyone who contributed to making this event. And please, there was a notice here and on the flyers, there are more events coming up about Ukrainian culture. Please jot those dates down in your calendars. This is only the beginning. There is much more to come.